Hi guys, Liz Truss met with her MPs on Wednesday night and the feeling within the Conservative Party ranges from doom to desperation. The Tories are facing a potential wipeout at the next election, but while some want to avoid it, the longer this saga continues, the more damaging it will be for the party. Liz Truss has lost control and lost the plot, it seems. Here Sam Coates of Sky News had an insight into what some of the Tory MPs are thinking, and there's a growing number believing it's better to rip off the plaster now and suffer some short-term pain than wait for the wound to get infected. Have a listen to what he had to say.
Well, I spoke to one of them earlier this evening, Dermot, and asked where MPs' heads are, and he simply said, in our hands. Look, there's no doubt that Liz Truss's meeting with her MPs today was something of a landmark moment, and they worry that that meeting showed signs of delusion. She told them that President Putin is to blame for the economic woes, and she also just simply said people hadn't been giving her government enough credit.
Delusional. Absolutely delusional. That Putin is responsible for this. That people are not blaming Putin enough. Now, this is one thing for her to say this to the public, but it's another thing for her to say it to her MPs. She shouldn't be taking this approach. She should be instead saying to the MPs, okay, we need you now. We need to rally the party. We need to circle the wagons. Because the alternative is a Labour government, and nobody here in the Conservative Party wants that. What I'm willing to do is I'm going to sit down with you, with each of the different factions, and listen to your concerns, and I'm going to rule. I'm going to operate as a Prime Minister, listening to the concerns of the party, of the public, and fixing this. But instead, it's let's find somebody to blame. In the same way that Boris Johnson was doing. Blaming everyone around him and never taking any responsibility. And Liz Truss is exactly the same. Instead of being a little bit humble, saying, I messed up, help me fix it. And if we can fix it, then we can keep the Labour Party at bay. But no, it's about blaming Putin and saying, why aren't people worshipping us enough?
And this came on top of her claim at Prime Minister's questions that she would not cut public spending. Now, Dermot, technically that might end up being true, but that's not going to be the experience of voters who are going to face the full force of inflation eating into public service budgets. And then this morning we had the spectacle as here we are on the brink of potentially an economic crisis with the government and the Bank of England effectively shouting at each other. And
can you imagine just for a moment if the Labour Party had been in power and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, a Labour Chancellor, was shouting at the Bank of England, was openly revolting against the Bank of England. The newspapers and the opposition, the Conservatives in opposition, would be calling for the Chancellor's head. They'd be calling for the Prime Minister to sack the Chancellor, or they'd be calling for the Prime Minister to resign as well. And we've seen this massive disaster, a disaster that is economically worse than the pandemic. It could even be said to be economically worse than Brexit and the pandemic together. And no one is resigning. No one is being forced out.
Contradicting one another. So it's no surprise you can find people plotting. There are people who want to go on after the October 31st statement on balancing the books, maybe a period of time after that. But there are problems. The Conservative Party would not want to have another leadership contest. They would want a unity candidate who could stand unopposed so that wouldn't go to the members in the country. But who could unify this Conservative Party with the contradictions and the factions and the emotions?
Who could? Now, people would naturally point to Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson can't unite the party, and I don't think Boris Johnson wants to unite the party. Who wants to jump into this disaster and say, I'm going to bring all the factions together? Because in the Conservative Party, you have the traditionalists, and you have these far-right think tank ideologues. So you have the ones who just want to cut all taxes, cut all regulations, cut the government down to the bone, sell off the NHS, cut on benefits, things like this. And then you have the more traditionalist ones who there's still a few of them. They have very strong voice. And I think after this disaster, I think they're going to have a stronger voice in the Conservative Party. But they're the ones who are saying, like, yeah, we have to look after the voters. Yes, we can throw business and industry a bone from time to time, but we have to also, show ourselves to be of sound economic mind. We can't be acting like Liz Truss. We have to be, the adults in the room, the conservative, to conserve the government, to conserve society, to protect the environment even. But these people are really in the back seat, and Liz Truss and the think tanks are in the driving seat. But once again, who is going to unite the party? Boris Johnson can't. He was removed to be replaced with somebody who was undoing his policies, then U-turning on some of those policies. Bringing Boris Johnson back will not unite the party. The factions will still remain, and there'll be great resistance to bringing back Boris Johnson. I think the only way out of this is a general election.
So if that can't be resolved, then what? Perhaps 40 or more Tory MPs might just end up pulling the emergency cord and voting with the opposition for a general election. They would know it would be a rout, but the logic goes, better that and have Labour face some of the problems rather than and sort out themselves in opposition, perhaps coming back sooner than the alternative of the party being obliterated in 2 years' time. There are no answers.
That is a possibility. So what he's pointing to here, of course, is that a few Tories would back the Labour Party, be called out as traitors, but they would they would force a general election. The Tories would be removed from power. Labour would inherit this poisoned chalice. They would struggle. This would be the thinking of the Conservatives. They would struggle for a bit, and their government would eventually collapse. There would be new elections, a bit like in Italy. There'd be new elections, and the Tories would be able to come back much stronger. I don't think that's possible now. I think so much damage has been done to the Tory brand. Liz Truss and Boris Johnson have done so much damage that if the Labour Party do win, I think they'll win with a massive majority, and they're going to undo a lot of this damage that the Conservatives have done. I think they're going to try and build bridges with Europe. They're going to try and build bridges with the Bank of England. Take a much more serious approach to this. This is what I would hope they would do, but I'm pretty sure that's what they would do. And they would, yes, there would be a lot of pain for a long time, but they would have such a majority, they'd be able to push through pretty much any sort of policy with very little resistance. And they would be able to say, look, we're cleaning up the mess. And they could use that as an excuse for a number of years, perhaps, before people turn against it. But what a disaster. And it's difficult to tell how long Liz Truss will remain, because she's as popular within her party as probably Theresa May was a few weeks before Theresa May resigned. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.